Hi, and welcome to Dani After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight is the June Book Club book review. And this month, what was voted on is Living with a Serial Killer, Delia Balmer, My Story. This is one of those books where I will say, if anybody has not read it and is viewing this and, is interested in the case of John Sweeney, it's definitely worth a read. I will say it is very violent and very detailed in how violent it is. So if this is one that might be a little bit too much to handle, maybe a little too triggering, this might be one that you want to sit out. But other than that, if this was a book that somebody was interested in, or even learning about John Sweeney from a victim's perspective, it's definitely worth a read. And this is it's written by Delia Balmer, so it is very victim-centered and victim-focused, which is always very important. So you get a different side of a serial killer in this book. So, all right, I will say I knew a bit about the John Sweeney case, but to read a bit more from Delia's angle and Delia's perspective was just very different. You don't get that type of perspective and kind of spotlight on a serial killer in this way, because she was able to give so much details that when you're just kind of reading up on a serial killer of that magnitude, you don't typically get those types of details. So you really saw the escalation in this case. I will say I have a lot of notes. So I will, if I said the page, how many pages of notes, you guys would be like, Dani, are you serious? So I'm just going to leave the number of pages I have out, but I will get to the most important things in that. So again, this book, I will say I had to, unfortunately, I had to get it used. I try my best to get, just because I'm like a wicked book snob, I try to get them brand new because I'm super OCD with I don't like pages bent or markings in a book, things like that. So, but I will say this came in a very good condition, so I was very pleased. So this book, again, Delia Balmer, it is, let me see how many pages. It is 327 pages, and there are no pictures in this book. So just be mindful of that. 327 pages. It reads very easily. The author made it very easy to keep reading. Again, if it's with the caveat of if it's too graphic and too violent, you might need to put the book down and maybe go back to it a later point. I found it the type of book where I could just sit and just keep reading and reading and reading until I had to stop for whatever I was doing, that night or that day. So I found it an easy read on that end. So there are 48 chapters. However, each of the chapters are only several pages long. So there are plenty of places where the reader can kind of easily pause the book if they need to, or just, as I would do, be like, well, let me just read one more chapter. All right, just one more. And next thing I knew, I'm like 20 chapters ahead of where I thought I would stop for the night, but to each their own. So What the book describes on the back is, as it says, John was waiting for me. He tied my ankles and my wrists to ropes concealed on the bed and threatened me with a gun and knife. Then he revealed that he had killed his former girlfriend. When Delia Balmer entered into a relationship with John Sweeney, she had no idea he was a serial killer. At first, he was attentive and caring, but over the course of their relationship, he became violent and controlling. On more than one occasion, he held Delia hostage and tortured her. During a final frenzied attack, he left her on the brink of death before going on the run. Astonishingly, it would take the police 6 years to capture and convict Sweeney of multiple murders. This is Delia's compelling memoir. That description is completely accurate. And it starts right away, as y'all heard, with the violence. And that was very true to form. The book itself doesn't jump into that. It gives you more of a background of Delia and how she met John. But in regards to the first paragraph on the back right away being all about the violence of John Sweeney, completely accurate, completely accurate. So before I jump into this, if anybody else has read the book and wants to jump on, I did leave the StreamYard link. Feel free to do so. If anybody has read it and wants to be in the chat and kind of comment back and forth, by all means, please do so as well. Or if you haven't read it and you're just hanging out, by all means, jump in the chat and yeah, let's just, you know, have a nice Thursday evening just doing the book review. So the book starts right away with Delia. So it was the spring of 1991 in Kentish Town, London. So yes, this book does take place over in London versus the UK for anybody who is not familiar with John Sweeney. Hi, Lori. This is getting bumped up to the top of my very extensive reading list. Yes, I love that. I love that. It is a very good read. So I hope after listening to this, you feel the need to maybe bump it up a little bit more. Who knows? But thank you for that comment. I'm really excited. When you do get a chance to read it, let me know. Either comment on this video or send me a DM or an email. I really genuinely love to talk books with people and to see what your takeaway was, because there's so much in a book, especially a book like this. And if you're, it kind of grabbed you with something different than me or whatnot, I would just love to hear about it. But I hope you're doing well, Lori. Good to see you. So Delia in Kentish Town, London, again, spring 1991, she had just moved into a council flat. So that, it sounds like the equivalent over here in the US to kind of like a subsidized rental unit, where here she had just broken up with her boyfriend of 4 years. She had nowhere to go. And at the time, no job. She had a job as a nurse, but that had ended when the place she was working to, the building got bought. So we get that little bit of a background as to why she specifically moved into this council flat. Let's see, I'm a book nerd. I'll definitely let you know. Yes, love that. Love book nerds. Love book nerds. I am one myself very proudly. Hi, Karen Diamond. You're looking lovely and green. Looking forward to this book. Thank you, Karen. Good to see you too. Hope you're doing well. So with Delia, and I will keep an eye on the chat as well, so I make sure I don't miss anybody's comments. So with Delia, we then get into the book again at the very beginning, how she grew up, how she moved around a lot. So she never really felt like she belonged anywhere. And she was quiet and she was shy and she didn't really own much. She literally describes how she had two suitcases and a box of stuff and items from her travels. And that was it. The council flat had a setup where the key was always really difficult to work. And she talks about that really should have been a sign of things to come. So in regards to that background of Delia just kind of traveling a lot and not really owning much, it comes into play much later, But at the beginning, you don't really get the significance of that until the book goes on, and it really kind of frames Delia as a person. So the book continues about where there was a holiday in 1991, and Delia at the time had nothing to do. So she just went down to the local bar. It was mostly empty. There was a guy who was staring at her the whole time. When their eyes met, he walked over and asked if he could join her for a drink, and they did. His name was John Sweeney. She invited him back to her place just to talk and to have some tea. He was so tired, he kept dozing off, and he actually spilled the tea on her brand new carpet. He asked her out again before she left, and she said no. So where Delia lived, she had a neighbor at the time who was schizophrenic and just really made her life hell. So being in her flat was just miserable. She would complain to the landlord, but it really just didn't go anywhere. So at one point she was out walking, ran into John again. He asked her out again. She declined. She felt bad though, because he seemed like a nice guy. So she decided to write him a note and give it to him the next time she saw him. And she ran into him again and gave him the note. They talked, and then they just started a friendship. Hey, Wolf, good to see you. I hope you're doing well. So John now, because they started their friendship, he began coming over to Delia's more frequently. And pretty soon, he was coming over every single evening after work. One day, he invited her over to his flat for dinner. It was him and 5 other guys that shared this flat. It was dirty, disgusting. There were just mattresses on the bedroom floors, and there was literally only what the guys needed. Delia, however, was kind of excited by this. It just seemed very freeing just to kind of live without all these just possessions just getting in your way, right? After dinner, her and John went to his bedroom that he shared with 2 others. And again, they just talked. And she found the conversation that she was having with him actually really awesome. And she found herself becoming more and more attracted to him. Soon, they began spending every single day together, and she got to know his roommates more. So the thing about Delia is, and this was one of the things that I kind of really connected with about her when I read this, was she was a dancer and trained ballet, loved to dance. And she found herself, however, very reserved around John. The one time that she did, they were out, there was music, she decided to start dancing. He actually asked her to sit down, and she was very taken aback by that. But nonetheless, she honored that request. So with John and his work, he would go to Germany for kind of like 2 or 3 months at a time and then come back. So he was, at this point in their friendship, going to be going to Germany for those 2 to 3 months. And before he left, Delia asked, when you come back, would you just like to live with me and stay here? And he said yes. He left. When he was going to leave, he brought his stuff first over to Delia's and gave her a big hug. She said, quote, before he left, he put his arms around me and held me tight. He made me feel so protected. His gestures seemed so sincere. I had no doubts at all about his affection for me. Hey, Zach. Good to see you. Hi, Dani. Guy giving eyes at the bar. Uh-oh. Tale as old as time, I suppose. Where's Beckham? He is the king of that, so I hear. But just kidding. Yeah. But the thing with John, and we'll kind of come to discuss tonight, is he's very persistent and he knows how to read people and could read Delia. And I don't think she or anybody else who kind of came across his path was really aware of that to the level that it was. But yeah, spot on. So yes, at this point, when he got back from Germany, he would be living with her. So at this point, he's away, he's in Germany, Delia's all alone in her flat. That downstairs neighbor, again, just causing problems for Delia. He would harass her, and he had friends, like kind of people, unruly people from the neighborhood that would come over and harass her as well. So she called the police. They did nothing. And one night she put a letter in the landlord's drop box marked urgent. And the next day she saw her neighbor being led away by 2 men. And she had told John about this. So she told him about it over the phone. And what he decided to do was call Delia twice a week while he was away. John did. And the thing was, it was very critical that she receive all of his phone calls. He told her, quote, "It's because I like you so much. You have to be there when I phone, or else I will get angry with you," end quote. Delia took this as to feeling important because he really wanted to speak with her. One night, John phoned and said he was going to be coming back early. Delia anticipated his arrival back from Germany, so she prepared herself a Chinese meal. The thing is, he arrived several hours later, and he actually brought a coworker back to Delia's place with him. They had stopped to drink, and she was really annoyed for this because she had invited him to stay with her, and now he's just showing up late when she took all this time to prepare dinner for the two of them, and he doesn't even really have her thoughts, into any type of consideration. The thing is, Delia said nothing. And any kind of nagging thoughts and kind of stresses she had about this, she just pushed them away. So Delia at this point gave John keys to her flat. She paid all the bills and the rent, and what he would do was pay for food and drink. And he also brought his pet tarantula, which, not my type of pet, but it is what it is. And once he moved in, she thought that, we're friends, we have these great conversations. So him moving in, we're going to have a lot to talk about and talk all the time. But that wasn't the case. Once he moved in, he was so quiet, and he would just sit there smoking weed and just looking at his pet tarantula for hours at a time. And in regards to any furniture that was needed, because Delia didn't have much money and he was handy, he would build all of the furniture. The clothes that he wore were very indicative of kind of the place that he formerly lived in. The clothes he wore were very old. They had a ton of rips in them, and if they had a rip, he would just patch it. So that some of the clothes that he had patches just all over them to keep them intact, which is very night and day from what was the kind of what people were dressing like at that time. But at the same time, it didn't bother Delia because, again, to her, it was very freeing. It was, he just lives by his own rules and does what he wants, and material things like clothes aren't important to him. So to her, that wasn't a bad thing. Wolf says, "Does that make you mad, Dani, if you make dinner for a guy and he doesn't care much about it?" So to answer that question, it's not about, for me, the takeaway from that was not the dinner. It was him not having consideration enough for her in regards to, this is her place. They've been apart for months. He was very, when I called, you have to answer. And now that he's saying, I will be home at this time, to now we will see each other, he doesn't show, doesn't call. And when he does, he's drunk, and he has another friend, a coworker friend that he has who's drunk as well because they stop for drinks, and just walks in without asking, saying, yeah, he's staying here too for the night, when he just got invited to live there before he left. So, and that's the issue to me, not the food. The food is, yes, that's an issue as well, but just a small one. The bigger issue is his disregard for her and her time and her generosity, and just her overall just being in a relationship and having respect. There's no respect. That's the core to me. Good point. Yeah, he sounds self-absorbed to max. Keep listening. Keep listening. Yeah, I mean, that's how that's just my interpretation, though. That's just my interpretation. So, but yeah, there'll be quite many more examples. So keep listening. So Delia's friend, Anne, so she was planning a visit, and John was going to be away for that time in Germany for work. So she thought, perfect. Anne can just stay with me. You know, it's a very small flat, but it will be fine so that she won't have to get a hotel nearby. So John knew this. The day of Anne's arrival, John basically just said, yeah, I'm not going to Germany, and left it at that. Delia was very confused and upset, angered, because this was very disruptive to the plans that she had made. And Anne arrives and sees John in Delia's flat, and she's like, what the heck? Anne decided to stay. She figured, you know what, it's fine. I will stay. I'll just sleep on pillows. So she did. I wouldn't have done that personally, but that's just me. Oh, no worries. Wolf, then get the book. Get the book, because every single chapter is like another layer for sure. But I'll tell you guys all about it. So yeah, Anne was not bothered, a little put out, but figured, okay, I'll stay. So the thing is, Anne actually liked John. Spending time around the two of them, she's like, yeah, he's not that bad. Delia took this as a really good sign. So any of those little kind of nagging questions that she had, she's like, you know what? My friend likes him. So clearly I chose the right guy. Delia then discusses how John opened up about his artwork to Delia. However, they were very violent and very pornographic in nature. He kind of dropped a little breadcrumb saying, yeah, I was in jail once in Australia for drugs, and kind of left it at that. In his drawings also was a girl named Melissa, a blonde model. That was his ex. They had broken up, and Delia kind of wondered why they broke up, but didn't push it. She didn't want to, bother John. So she just knew that was Melissa in the drawings. Again, they were all violent and pornographic in nature. But Delia just kind of thought, you know what, he's opening up to me. I don't want to push it. I'll leave it at that. So John then decided he would draw Delia and put his art all over the walls of the flat. When he drew her, it was unlike the way he drew his ex, Melissa. Melissa was very beautiful in his art. Delia was drawn in a very ugly way. And she didn't like that. But again, she did not push it. So John now goes back to Germany for work, and Delia went to Germany to go visit him for a week. And as soon as she got there, he wanted sex immediately in the hotel room. They then went drinking with his coworkers. And instead of going back to the hotel for the night, he was like, oh, let's just sleep on the beach. She was not okay with that, but didn't want to upset John. And when Delia actually expressed that, you know what, I'm not okay with this, in a very low-key way, because again, she very early on in the relationship kind of doesn't want to upset him. And as we'll come to learn, it's very easy for him to be upset and angered. The littlest hint of, you know what, I don't really want to sleep on a bench, he got very visibly angry. And all of the sites that John said, when you come visit, we're going to go see all of them. Nothing. None of them ever happened. Lori says, why don't women run from men like this? It's so upsetting. It's very easy, Lori, and I had to catch myself so often, like at different points in the book, it's so easy to, again, in hindsight and outside looking in, see, oh my gosh, why didn't she do this in this angle? Or why don't X, Y, and Z? It's very easy for us to kind of think that but I'm also going into this knowing I'm reading a book about a serial killer and I know how it's going to end. With that being said, men like John Sweeney are very manipulative and abusive, and they know when to when to turn on the charm. They know when to they know what they're doing. And it's so sad to say that, because there are so many men since John Sweeney's time that have been just like what he does. Serial killers, maybe even not even serial killers. It's very manipulative, and they know what they're doing. And with Delia, and it's never victim blaming, never, never, never. The men who do this, or the predators that do this, they are able to, I don't know what the right word is. They're not going to waste their time necessarily on somebody where they're not going to get the end result of what they want. So they're going to target certain victims, in this case, women, for John Sweeney, where he's able to control the situation to get his end result and to get what he wants, which is unfortunate, because somebody like Delia, who, and former girlfriend Melissa, as we'll come to learn, who are just kind, good-hearted people, get in just a really, really shit situation. So I hope that kind of answers that. But yeah, it's very easy at each point to be like, oh no, I would have done, or why? No, don't do that. But again, I would have to even myself take a step back and be like, not my journey. I'm reading somebody else's who's being extremely open about all the bad, what she would even say, like, oh, I in hindsight, should not have made that choice. So kind of respecting that as well. But yeah, there'll be a lot more instances where those kind of red signals, red flashing signals, for John will come up. So Delia, now, she was taking a massage course, and she needed to get 30 clients to complete that course. So what John did was say, you know what, I have old roommates, coworkers, like, let me help you meet that goal. And one of the guys that John hooked her up with to kind of get those training hours, he actually grabbed Delia completely inappropriately. He grabbed her breast. Delia told John, and from these little bit of flashes of anger that we get from John towards Delia, she would think, okay, he's gonna be so mad that somebody did this to me. He did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And she was very taken aback by that. And anytime that she would try to do basic things, for example, she, again, didn't own many items. The ones she owned were from her travels. So her teacups, for example, when he would go to use them, he was just very not careful with them. And she's like, you're going to break them. They mean so much, but you're going to break them. Please be careful. Please be careful. And he would get very mad and say, don't make me mad. Needless to say, her items broke, and he didn't care. Judas Bruce, hello. Serial killer, the term was invented in England, so American took it and ran with it. However, there are many governments that took it further before them, and that killing is our culture as humans. Thank you for the definition of in going back to where I'm trying to think of like my FBI profiler books of when like the behavioral unit started and when they kind of brought in that term serial killer. And I can't remember if they took it from, like you said, took it from England in another place, but that would not surprise me. Oh, I'm trying to think because I recently read one of those books, so I should know that as well. But thank you for that comment. So, all right. One of the other things that Delia found out about with John was he told her he was 1 year older than her. Turns out he was 5 years younger than her. So again, like upfront lies and not total honesty. So when any of Delia's female school or work friends invited her to go out and do something, John didn't want her going. He didn't like that. It would actually make her feel really bad. So in turn, she decided, you know what, going forward, I just won't go. Delia started to give examples of going to a former colleague's apartment for a party. And this is one where she did invite John. And he, again, it doesn't surprise anyone that he was so just not, I hate to say not aware, because he was aware, but not concerned at all about any other people's belongings, their space, their own living conditions. Because again, he's going into somebody else's apartment here and he just doesn't respect it. So at one point during the party, he's out on the balcony and he has to pee. Doesn't want to go inside. So there's a plant right there and he pisses in the plant. The next morning, the roommate, because a bunch of them stayed over, the roommate discovers that and they all knew it was John. And Delia was mortified because she brought him there. And he was just so disrespectful of her colleague, her friend's apartment. So needless to say, at that point, Delia says they never saw each other again. Oh, thank you. That's so kind. Yeah, my interview with Nicholas Schreck. Yeah, that's one of my favorite interviews that I did, interviewing him about Richard Ramirez. So if anybody missed that, check it out. So thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that. So back to our subject here, John. So Delia would give a lot more examples of things that he would do. Like he would light up a joint no matter where he was, and he didn't care. If he was told not to do it, he would still do it anyway. He did not care. And it's interesting because early on, those were traits that Delia was like, he doesn't live by society rules. He just does what he wants. That's so freeing. But then when it kind of comes to, we're now dating, I'm bringing you to my friends, to my family, and he's still exhibiting that type of, well, I don't care in front of them. It's, that's when it really starts to bother Delia. So Delia had never wanted to make John mad. She would really try to avoid it. However, one night she woke up in the middle of the night and found John choking her. Oh, thank you. You didn't need to do that. Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you so much. So you did that very interesting part here in the story, but thank you. Very appreciated. So the next morning, Delia confronted John because when she woke up, he was choking her. And then after, just rolled over and went back to bed. He didn't say a thing. So the next morning, again, she confronted him and he completely dismissed her and just said, well, the strangling, I must have been having a bad dream. And then that was that. He didn't address it further. So at this point, they go to visit Delia's family. Delia is growing really frustrated with John and she wants approval by her parents and her brothers of John when she goes to visit. And in the end, she doesn't really get that with them. She realizes that he, again, just acts the way he does, not taking her feelings into account, not taking her family's feelings into account. And she realized at that point she just couldn't do it anymore. And when she was with her brother and John was there, her brother just flat out said to him, have you ever killed anyone? And John's answer was, quote, in England, there's a lot of arson, but the newspapers covered it up, end quote. And that was kind of that. And it ended. Then Delia decides she's going to Mexico, but she doesn't go alone. She did not invite John. John invited himself to the trip. John, when he was there with Delia, he decided to carry all of their belongings. on his, like on a backpack as they traveled. So think of that. He's carrying it all, and then he's annoyed and frustrated that he's carrying it all. He doesn't have to do that. He chooses to do that. But also, keep in mind, he's carrying her belongings as well. So anytime she needs something, she has to ask him for her stuff. And he doesn't want that. He's annoyed and he's frustrated. So she decides, I don't want to make him mad, so I'll just kind of go without the things I need while we're walking. And he had this attitude the whole trip, and it just completely ruined it. Mr. Beckham, Mr. Beckham, Mr. Beckham. Well, thanks for the donation there, Mr. Beckham. But do I really have to say it? Mr. Beckham is the best. Thank you. Thank you. And for more of Mr. Beckham, tune in tomorrow night for the True Crime and Chill. All right. Oh, don't condone him. Don't condone him. So now they are back from Mexico, and Delia wanted to tell John to move out, and she did, but he just keeps pushing it off. So she's saying, be out by the end of the month. And he just stayed again and again and again. She started getting frustrated. And at one point, she just decides to cut her hair erratically. But she did it so bad, she had to go to the hairdresser to fix it. Now, there's an instance where John shows up unexpectedly at her workplace. And he says that, I'm just coming here to let you know I'm leaving right now to go to Germany. The thing is, he never did that before. He would just literally leave and not even tell Delia. Delia's coworker who was with her saw this and kind of made note. And even Delia had said, things aren't right. So she was actually a bit relieved that her coworker, somebody else, could kind of see John in this light in kind of who he was. So now John is in Germany, and it convinces Delia to come visit. So she does. And when Delia goes out there, John is with a coworker friend, Alex. And John spends his entire time talking with Alex, so completely ignoring Delia. She was extremely annoyed. And it got to the point where Alex was almost kind of like to Delia, why are you here? Like, Alex isn't even comprehending, like, why are you here, Delia? It's just, John's not even paying attention to you. Why are you even here? So let's see. After a long day of drinking while she was visiting, John wanted to get some weed, and he went and found somebody, and the person basically robbed him and took the money and left. So John gets very, very angry, finds the guy, and then beats him up, like really, really hurts him. Delia didn't like seeing this type of violence, ran away, ran into a club, and Alex left too. But the thing is, John chased after her. He would not leave her alone. So as she says, his face was twisted and he was yelling at Delia in public in this club, you're a whore, you're a slut, etc. When Delia finally gets back to the hotel, she's thinking, oh no, he's still behind me. Like, he's angry. He's saying all these things. This is just going to be a horrible night. Nope. He was just back to himself. And she knew that was just off, but this was the first time she really saw that side of him. So they go to bed. The next day, woke up, he's acting like it never happened, like it never happened. So she said, I don't want to be with you at this point. And she asked him to move out when they got home. And he said, yeah, sure, just very calmly. Now, what do you think? They get back. John wouldn't leave. He keeps saying, yeah, I'll be moving out next week. I'll be moving out next week. The thing is, at this point, he stopped going to Germany as frequently, so he was always in Delia's flat. So there's times when he would leave, and she got like a little bit of space and a little bit of a breathing room. Now those are less and less. And they did share a bed in the flat, and in bed, he would push her against the wall. So he was taking up almost all of the space and cramming her against the wall very painfully. she would wake him up and say, "Can you please move him? You're hurting me." And then he would get mad that she did that. And then he would just do it right again that same night. Is this in the 1970s? 1991. 1991, Wolf. So Delia confided everything in a coworker friend named Rosie. And Rosie had said, "Has John hit you?" She said, "No." And at least, again, in Delia's mind, she's telling a coworker, if something's not right in my relationship, be on the lookout for that. So now Delia went to visit a friend of hers, her friend Martine. And she went without John. And the thing is, she didn't even tell John she was going to visit her friend. And it sounds so simple, right? Where you're like, you know what? I have a free day today. I'm not working. I'm just going to go hang out with my friend. But with John, that's a very big deal. So not only did she go out with her friend without John, she stayed over her friend's place. And when she got back home to her own flat, John immediately started questioning, "Where have you been?" And she just was like frustrated, gave him attitude back. And then she went to bed. Like, "I'm not dealing with this. I'm just going to bed." Suddenly he burst into the bedroom and he got rope and he tied her up to the bed, kind of like in a crucifix. He pulled out a gun and a knife and he told her not to scream or he would cut out her tongue. John was asking Delia while he had her tied up a bunch of questions. One of them being, quote, "I suppose you wonder what happened to my American girlfriend, Melissa." So John describes that when they were in Amsterdam, Melissa was there and there were 2 German guys and John killed all of them. And he sat with the bodies for 3 days. He didn't know what to do, didn't want the police to find him. So on the 3rd day, he cut up the bodies, put them in bags, and threw them in the canal. After John told Delia this, he then raped her. So after he raped her, he just went to sleep next to her, but left her tied up. So John, while this happened, ended up putting on loud music just to drown out everything. So at one point, a neighbor came to the door to complain about the loud music. Delia's still tied up in bed. She wanted to scream to alert the neighbor something's wrong. I'm tied up against my will, but she didn't think it was worth the risk because the odds would have been in her favor. Maybe the neighbor wouldn't have believed her or wouldn't have come in. John would have shut the door, and then who knows what he would have done more to her. So she's now tied up for a whole day. The next morning, John then says to her, "Well, the gun, it wasn't really real. The story I told you about Melissa, it was a joke." But as Delia says, quote, "He had shown his true self, and I would never have unseen the monster behind the mask," end quote. And then the monster returned back to his normal self because the phone started to ring unexpectedly. The reason the phone rang was Delia was supposed to be at work and she was not there. And that was very unlike her. So John answered the phone and said to Rosie, the coworker, and if you're thinking, Rosie, that's the one Delia confided in. Yes. He said, "Oh, well, she went away unexpectedly." And Rosie's like, no. So Rosie called again. And she said, "If Delia is not at work by 12 p.m., I'm going to call the police." So John panicked. And what he did was he made Delia call Rosie back and confirm his lie. So again, he has weapons. He has tied her up. And she said, okay. She knew that Rosie would be able to tell that something was off and something was wrong. So John let her do that. Then after that, Delia's still tied up, and John then decided to confide, and I'm using those terms loosely, confide in Delia. He started to tell her about when he was a kid, the abuse that he suffered, the scar on his back, and that visible scar on his back that he had. And he said, the murders that I told you about, I never told anyone, but I'm telling you. So Delia said, "You really need to see a counselor." He said, "Yes, We will go see one tonight. And she's thinking, okay, I'm held hostage. I'm tied up. When we get out to go see a counselor, it's my chance to get out. But as typical John does, he just pushed it off and pushed it off again and again. This takes place in 1991. So, bit back. Okay. Quick reference to, yes. Just in case y'all don't believe me. Spring 1991. So now Delia, John keeps pushing off going to see a counselor. She doesn't know what to do. John is sleeping in bed beside her. And before he goes to sleep, he unties her. So now think about it. He only did that because he knew she won't make a break for it, right? And he was right. He was such a light sleeper, and Delia knew if she tried to escape, he would wake up and he would most likely kill her. So she didn't. So at that point, John, again, he has been holding her hostage now for a bit of time. Rosie has called. She is not at work. He has the idea, let's go to a coffee shop together, right? And this is just another example of showing the kind of control that he knew he could force over Delia. So they did. And yes, they're in public. Could she have made a break for it? Yes. But she didn't, because she weighed those options where they were, where they sat, how much space he gave her, while he's ordering the coffees and whatnot. She didn't think she could outrun him and get away, because if he caught up to her, which he would, he's going to kill me. So she didn't. So then at that point, they decide to, again, they had their coffee out, and John says to her, when we get back, I'm going to leave the flat like you wanted. And he gave her his keys. So they get back to the flat and he leaves. That was 5 days now that passed. So 5 days that she endured this. So the next morning at 8 a.m., Delia woke up. So he had then been gone a day, and John walks in the door and he says, I couldn't bear to leave you. And if you're wondering, how did he walk in the door? He made copies of those flat keys so he could get back anytime he wanted. And it's at that point in the book that Delia says she knew she would never be able to get rid of John. Oh, absolutely. You can't counsel your way out of this. Little bit. At least I look younger, like 30 years. Good for you. Oh, jealous. So now, again, she has been held hostage for 5 days. She gets back to work and she told her coworkers what happened. They say, why didn't you go to the police? And she says, I didn't feel that they would be able to keep me safe. And this is one point in the book where you think, but why didn't you go? But why didn't you go? They will protect you. They will keep you safe. Put a pin in that. Put a pin in that. We will revisit that very soon. I promise you. So 2 weeks later, again, John has now weaseled his way back. She is surprised by John when he surprises her with tickets to go to Madrid. She doesn't want to rock the boat with him. She doesn't want to make him angry, so she agrees to go. And they do. When they get back from the trip to Madrid, he was always at the flat. She would say, John, you need to move out. And he would say, I know, I will next week, and pushes it off and pushes it off. She knows he's really never going to leave. And she doesn't think she can force him. So she started having mouth pain due to the stress of all of this. So she went to a doctor and she told the doctor everything. This is where we're getting back to that. So the doctor sent her to a psychologist. So the psychologist heard her, and after meeting with her says, there's nothing I can do for you. And he actually just ushered her out. So Delia said, well, what about another appointment? And they said, yeah. We'll mail you a letter with another appointment date. But they never did. So she went to another doctor to try to get him, John, sanctioned. What she thought was, if I can get him sanctioned, he's not mentally well, he will be out. What they did, however, was they gave her a card and told her to go there. The card was for an organization called First Step. Delia had no idea what this was, but she went. They said at First Step that she had to leave her flat immediately. So they found her a bed and breakfast in King's Cross for her, and they also called the police without her knowing. When they told her they called the police, she was angry. And when that happened, she felt, they don't understand. They are putting me in mortal danger. And the police, when they got the call, they kind of thought it really didn't matter. So there's that. Go to Madrid and Barcelona, by the way. Good times, not the same, but fun nonetheless. Thank you for that. I have not been, so I cannot say by experience. So Delia, again, the police aren't taking her seriously, but she told them everything. The police that decided to accompany her to her flat to collect some belongings did so when John was at work. Delia, again, with the police there, she's like, they're not understanding the severity of the situation. She's like, I don't want to go to King's Cross. All of John's artwork was in the flat, and she wanted to show them and said, he also confessed to me about killing someone, about killing his ex-girlfriend, Melissa. Here's how he said he did it, and showed them his art. It's graphic, it's violent, it's pornographic. And what the police officer said about this was, oh, come on now, that's carrying it a bit far. He's just trying to scare you. She knew they did not believe her. So instead of going to that bed and breakfast that the organization found for her, she just sent the police away. Another thing to put a pin in is John Sweeney's art. Kind of keep that in mind in the back of your head. So John, who now does not know this happened, he goes through Delia's stuff regularly, and she did not know this. So she put, just as a precaution, that First Step card in her bicycle bag. Well, he searched her stuff and he found it. So that was a huge thing. And he found it on her birthday when he was going to confront her about it. The thing is, she was coming home from work. She rode her bicycle, and it was her birthday. So she thought, you know what, I'm going to stop at a bar and have a drink. And she saw someone that her and John both knew. And she told this mutual friend, I don't feel safe around John. And the friend said, the thing with John is he will never let you leave. When Delia got home, John said, oh, I saw you at the bar with so-and-so. So it had been clear that not only does he go through her stuff, but he follows her and watches her. So Delia decided she needs to go back to First Step. And she shows back up and says, I wasn't ready for the help before, but I'm ready now. They literally shut the door in her face and said, you had your chance. So that was that. So Delia now goes on a trip to visit her family, and she's thinking, okay, this will be time to get away from John, to be just without that stress right now. John asks for the phone number to her parents so that he could call. And what she decides to say is, I don't know their number offhand. They changed it. I don't know it. So Delia then flies out to see her family back in the US. She got there and John had called. He got the number for her parents out of the phone book, and he would call every single day. And what Delia didn't want to talk to him, but Delia's parents not understanding and not knowing, because she never told them what was happening. So her mom would just say, oh, on the phone to John, oh, yeah, she doesn't want to talk to you. And John would he actually sent her flowers. And Delia was outraged. She's like, I don't want the flowers. So when John called again, Delia's mom says she doesn't like the flowers and she doesn't want you to call. Not because, her daughter just confided in her with what was happening. Again, just made those comments. Delia was so beside herself because she knew it was going to make everything with John worse. And the thing is, John knew that this was going to make her look bad in front of her parents. He is sounding like, and presenting himself on the phone, even though they don't like him. Let's be clear, her parents do not like him. But he's calling to check on his girlfriend. He's sending her flowers. He's doing all these sweet things, and she ignoring him. So she's looking like the bad one, right? And at one point, Delia was going to go with her brother to the Dallas Zoo. And her dad said, no, you can't go because John was going to be calling and I don't want you to miss that call. So Delia started crying, and she says she let out a little bit of the truth. And what she says was, I can't do anything without him stopping me. But again, her parents didn't pick up on the severity, because what her dad said was, quote, you got yourself into this, so you're going to have to put up with it, end quote. So as Delia's crying, again, she's legally an adult and can do what she wants, but her parents aren't letting her. So her mom decided to say, you know what? You can go to the zoo with your brother. Just don't wait for John's call. It's fine. So Delia decides to go with, again, what she planned to do was to go to the zoo with her brother, Stuart. And Stuart said, you know what? A lot of stress with parents now. Let's just stay at my apartment for the night. So she does. And then while back at her parents the next day, they want to speak to Delia because John now decided to call her parents again and say, you know what? Your daughter, she's been hiding from you. She has a drug problem and she also has herpes, and she gave it to me. Delia was mortified of the situation that John just put her through. These are all lies. And again, he has put her in a situation where he's making her look bad and he's presenting it as believable. Towards the end of the trip, she ended up telling her brother Stuart everything. And she said, please don't tell mom and dad. He asked, what are you going to do? And she's like, I don't know. So she told Stuart she was afraid if she stayed with John, that, again, what would happen to her? But if she left John, he would not only hurt her, but he would most likely hurt her entire family as well. So she felt kind of stuck. Hey, Fiddle, did Beckham pay $2 to pump his own tire? He absolutely did. And are you shocked at all, Fiddle? Yeah. Not at all. Not at all. None of us are shocked. But good to see you, hon. So Delia now comes back from her trip in the U.S. visiting her family. And while she was gone, Delia's friend Martine wrote a letter to her. And John decided to open it and read it. In the letter, Martine talks about domestic violence and contact numbers where Delia can go for help. John confronted Delia about it, and it didn't go very well. And he also confronted Delia about her parents. Why were your parents telling me you don't want to talk to me? Why didn't you like the flowers? Delia was like, I just got home from traveling. I'm going to go to bed. So she goes to bed. John enters the bedroom and removes his clothes. And she said, I don't want to have sex. I feel sick. But then she says, John never took no for an answer. So Delia then decides that she needs to start. She's been hiding money from John that her parents have been kind of giving her over time. She's been hiding it so that she can, again, spend it on whatever she needs, something big that would come up. But John doesn't know about it. And now all of a sudden, John's kind of changing things. He's saying, let's go out to dinner. And they're expensive dinners. And he's paying for them. He's paying for them in cash. But when they go, it's not like they're having this great dinner as a couple. They're still in a horrible manipulative, abusive relationship, but John's doing this more and more and more. And one of the nights that they go out to eat, he tips the waiter a huge tip. She's like, where does he have this money? He hasn't been working for a while. So she decides to check on the money she hid. He found it. Most of it was gone, and she was mortified about that. So what she decided to do at that point was hide her passport in her locker at work, just in case, because she's like, I don't know what he's going to do. Soon after she does that, all of a sudden, John says to her, hey, where's your passport? What did you do with it? She never answered. Hey, Auntie Mimi. Hope you're doing good. Good to see you. So John now starts getting more and more rough when he has sex with Delia. And the way that Delia describes it is, she doesn't say when we had sex, she says when he had sex. And that's something she says throughout the book, because she makes it very clear, I was not a willing participant. I said no, but he did so anyway. So he would have rough sex with her, and then he would bring her flowers. And she's like, I don't want the flowers. I would just rather you not make me have, force me to have sex. But in the end, John did not care about Delia and only cares about himself. So John at this point says, hey, can I borrow money? Can I borrow $500? He says he's going to go back to Germany to work. So she's like weighing her options, and she's like, okay, if I give him the money, he'll at least leave for a little bit. So she does, but he doesn't go. Several weeks later, Delia returns home from work one day, and all of his things in the flat are gone. And she's like, okay. But she knew he always comes back. He leaves keys, but he has all these other spare keys made. So she's like, it's only a matter of time before he comes back. So she goes to work, comes home thinking, oh, he's going to be there. And day after day, he's not there. One evening, she returns home from work, and she is still hesitant. She gets in, opens the door, kind of scans her flat as she enters. And at this point, the bathroom door suddenly flies inward. John burst into the kitchen where she had walked into. Delia instantly started screaming. And at that point, he dug his fingers into her mouth. He dug them in such a forceful way that it did actually a lot of damage, and she started bleeding. And he actually reprimanded her, because even though he had all these keys, what he didn't expect was she had the locks changed. And if you're thinking, wait a minute, Dani, then how did he get in? He got in the main front door because the neighbor let him in. And what he did was he ran around back, and in the bathroom, there was a tiny, tiny window that she left open. He was able to use a ladder and go up and crawl in through that tiny opening in the bathroom window. And he said, I've been sitting here waiting for you to come home all day. And at that point, he said he wanted sex. And yeah, so he forced himself on her again. He then kept his eye on her that entire rest of the weekend. He would not let her leave his sight. So for example, if she wanted to even use the bathroom, he would go into the bathroom with her and watch her. He says at one point, you know what, let's go out. Let's go out for a drink. Let's go to the bar. And he promised, if we go, I will leave and not come back again. And Delia was thinking, oh, I don't want to go out in public, but I also, am I safer in public than here? And it's one of those weighing her, the lesser of two evils, if you will. So she just decided, it's fine. We'll go. I will, keep it low, keep everything low key, keep him from getting mad. We will go. At the bar, he then changes his mind and says, you know what? I don't want to leave. I want to stay in your flat. Delia says, no, you can't stay. But again, he outpowers her and says, I'm staying. And as she says, John always got his way. When it was time to leave the bar, Delia, again, after having this conversation where he's saying, I won't leave, she decides to use the bathroom. She stays in there as long as she could. And John then goes in and finds her, and she says, she's not coming out. He gets really angry and abruptly turns and just walks out. The bartender, she eventually makes her way out, and by that point, everything's kind of closed down. The bartender says, hey, it's time to leave. And she's like, I can't go out there. John is out there, and I'm in danger. So the pub manager talks to Delia and says, let's call the police. They call the police, but they say, no, we're too busy. We're not going to come. So the pub manager says, well, let me walk you to, down a couple of streets, and then you can make the rest of you walk yourself to the police station. Maybe that will be a better outcome. So the bar manager does that, and she makes the rest of the walk to the police station by herself. So she gets there. They're completely dismissive of her. They're saying, it's the weekend. We are too busy. We do not have time for this. That you say you're in danger with your boyfriend. She's like, I really need the help. And they say no. So she walks out. But she walks right back in and says, I need the help. I'm in danger. They are annoyed, but they said, fine, we'll drive you back to your flat. So they walk her to her flat door, and then they're annoyed and they just leave. The next day, so Martine, her friend, calls her because she received a letter from Delia. Martine says, I'm not going to go to your flat, but I would meet you at a pub, an open space at 2 p.m. The reason she's doesn't want to meet Delia at her flat is because Martine knows John will be there. So it got near 2 p.m. and Delia was thinking, okay, I have to go meet my friend, but I'm cautious. I don't know where John is. I had the police escort me home. I don't know. So she goes to put her ear against the door, listens, doesn't hear anything, is thinking, okay, it's near 2 p.m. I'm going to meet my friend. Let me just exit and get out. And again, she's very cautious because we don't know where John is at this point. As soon as she opens that door, even though she was listening, looking, John appears. He puts his fingers down her throat again, damages her more, and Delia starts to scream. But the thing is, he's much stronger than her and overpowers her and forces her back inside her flat and locks the door. He says to her, I was on the roof waiting for you to come home when the police walked you home last night, and I heard everything. And then when you were on the phone with Martine making plans, I heard that as well. He says, I just want to talk to you and I'll be gone within 10 minutes. But as always, 10 minutes pass and John was still there. The phone started ringing a little bit after 2 p.m. Delia knew it was Martine and John knew it was Martine because she was supposed to meet her friend at 2 p.m. But they don't pick up the phone. John does not let her pick up the phone. So then the police show up at her flat. Pops out of, yeah, right? But yeah, he was on the roof and heard everything. That's what do you do? So the police come because Martine called the police. John didn't open the door because he didn't know what to do. And he says to Delia, you open the door and tell them you're okay. And Delia refuses. The police knock again, no answer. But the police know that she's in there. On the third knock, Delia says, fine, I'll open the door and tell them I'm okay. She opens the door and she just says, help me. Delia bursts out of the flat. She runs down the street. Martine is down there and Martine hugs her. They hide in a shoe shop. Delia's like, no, just keep going. Just keep going. I need to get away. And at this point, they can see John being taken away by the police. So the police speak to Delia and say, you're all set to go back to your flat. And she's like, are you kidding me? She was too scared. So she says, I will stay with Martine for the night. So the police call her while she's at her friend's flat, and Delia is scared. They want her to come to the police station to give a more formal statement. Martine says, I'll go with you. But along the drive there to get to the police station, Martine says, I can't do this, and says, you're basically on your own. So Delia does make a statement on her own. What she says is, I was there the night before at the police station asking for help. They dismissed me. All they did was look at each other and kind of say, are you really in danger of your, your ex-boyfriend, or as they say, boyfriend? So they kind of look at each other, but, don't really acknowledge that there was a mistake made. So Delia, because of the damage to her throat, the police have a doctor look at her, and the doctor says it was really damaged. So it was way worse than even Delia had thought it was. So the police say to her, John is in jail, and actually he's asleep in his cell. It didn't bother him. Delia was weak because she hadn't really eaten anything in a couple of days. So she was weak from that, and she had to find her own way home because they wouldn't bring her back home. So yeah, she had to figure it out herself. When she got home, all she could do was sleep and wonder, how long are they going to hold John? How long will he be away for now? So now it is mid-morning after that incident occurred, and 2 detectives from the domestic violence team who's in charge of Delia's case come to the flat to introduce themselves. They said John went to court that morning and he was put in Pentonville prison until he attends court next. Originally, John was supposed to be in jail for at least several months. The police say to her as well, you should move somewhere he can't find you. Delia says, no, I'm going to stay where I am for now. She, in her mind, she's thinking the police are supposed to protect me, so I shouldn't have to move. When going, and this is one of those examples I kind of told you guys earlier, when going over her statement with the police, one of the officers said, you made the statement of when he had sex. Don't you mean when we had sex? And she says, no, don't get it wrong. He had sex. The officer was confused why she didn't just say the word rape. And Delia just said, it's just the way it is. And it's up to her if she wants to use that term or not. What she's describing is that. But the officer that is beyond poor training on the officer's end, I must say. But she made it very clear to them. He had sex. We did not have sex. So Delia then finds out 1 week after his arrest on November 22nd, John was released from prison on bail. He was supposed to be in there for at least several months. So there were bail conditions, like he was supposed to stay at his parents'. There was a curfew where he couldn't be outside of the 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. time frame. He had to report to the police station daily, etc. And he couldn't be within 1 mile of Delia's flat. Delia said to the police, you do not understand. He will come for me. He will kill me. The response that the police gave Delia blows my mind. No one breaks their bail terms. She said, believe me, John will. What the hell? When I was reading that, I was like, are you kidding? Nobody breaks the terms of their bail. Nobody. So Delia said it wasn't that much longer where she learned that when the police had searched her flat after that day John was arrested, that he held her hostage, when she was supposed to meet her friend. She found out, again, it was much later on, that one of the things that police found was, and it was John's, it was a green canvas bag. It had masking tape, surgical gloves, a large plastic ground sheet, rope, a saw, and a waterproof hat. Delia knew that was a disposal kit of her body that was going to be meant for her. However, the police finding that bag, it meant nothing to them. It was like, yeah, we found this bag with all these items, but it means nothing. Let's put a pin in that too. So John is now out on bail, as we know, and the police officers, they came by to check on Delia. She expressed she was going to be going back to work soon at this point. Originally, she took 3 weeks off to kind of deal with everything that was going on. And she said, the only time I ever leave my flat is to get food, and is always in the day. I never leave at night. And I always leave my front light off, thinking if John were to go by when he wasn't supposed to, then he would see the light on and think she was home. So she would purposely leave it off. Delia again expressed her concerns. She says, I'm going back to work. I ride my bike to and from work. It will be dark when I get home. They just said, if he shows up, call. Just call us if he shows up. That was her. The other thing they told her was, if he shows up, just scream. It's so frustrating. So frustrating. So yeah, I hope y'all are sensing the theme that I was, as I was reading this, was like, oh my God, it's like every opportunity for law enforcement to help her, they're not. They're doing the opposite. So now it's December. She has returned to work and she is in a very fragile state. Think about it. Everything that's going on, she's returning to work. She's feeling just her shortcomings of, messing up because she's just not used to being back in with everything that gone on. So she's feeling worthless. She's feeling, I'm failing at my job. Can't even do that right. Things like that. So an acquaintance that Delia had with someone named Tessa. So she had stopped by to visit Delia. And what Delia did was she told to Tessa what's going on. And Tessa had said, I have a friend who's actually been through something similar and I want to introduce you, because at this time, Delia has nobody who can even begin to understand what's going on. So she goes with Tessa to meet this friend. And the friend, she's never named in the book. The way Delia talks about it is like, she listened to me. She believed me. The police don't even believe me, but she believed me. This woman gave Delia advice as well. And one of them was move out immediately so John won't know where to find you. So that's just my cat at the door, just pawing away. So if that is picking up on the mic, that's why. So John went back to court again, and it did not go in Delia's favor because his bail was extended. So now at this point, he was going to be out until January 11th. This was going to be his next court appearance. So anytime now, so Delia's on pins and needles. Anytime she gets home from work, if there's somebody outside, she says, can you please accompany me to my flat door? And one of the nights that she comes home, December 22nd, 1994. Delia, it was actually her last day of work on the assignment that she was given. And she biked home. There was nobody outside that evening that could walk her to her flat door. Delia was cautious, so she's looking in each direction, making it up the steps. And at one point, she gets up there and looks to her right, and John is there. And he says, quote, you didn't expect to see me here, did you? John wanted to go. He says, I'm just here to talk. Can we go inside and talk? And Delia says, no. He then immediately got forceful and physical. Delia tried to get away, but John's right hand reached over the low wall that was there at the flat complex. He retrieved something that he had hidden on the steps of his neighbors. It was an axe. And suddenly, what Delia felt was the axe had hit the side of her skull. I'm waiting for John to show up. Yeah, the cat at the door adds to the story. Yeah, it's my cat Loki. I don't think he's liking this. Yeah, so we're here. So John, with his axe, he kept swinging and swinging and swinging and hitting her in the arms. The whole time, Delia's screaming and she's shouting. Keep in mind, like I said, this is a flat complex, so which would be similar to an apartment complex here in the States. But there's no one around. So John then drops his axe and pulls out a dirty old rusty knife that he had hidden beneath his coat. Delia kicks him and he loses his balance. And so he goes down and accidentally cuts himself on the palm of his hand. He yells at her, you fucking bitch. And then he lunges towards her. Delia is able to see her bicycle that she just used near her. And she thought, okay, this is my only means of an escape. So she she describes it much better in the book than I can in my notes, but she let the bike fall on her almost like to give her some time while he is dealing with, accidentally cutting himself. The thing is, John had the axe and goes to swing, but instead of hitting her, he hit her bike purposely to completely damage it, so she has kind of no means to get away. John then grabs that dirty knife again and cuts Delia. It was a 12-inch long blade of a knife, and it cut through her right breast and into her lung. But John does not stop there. He then plunges the knife into her right side. He then takes the axe, swings it again, leveling it with the fingers of Delia's hands. And she then describes how she looks in horror at the side of her hand and she sees her little finger go flying in the air towards the house next door. Absolutely horrific. Delia discusses at this part of the book really deep into what her mindset was. She felt a huge range of emotions. She knew John was going to kill her. She just knew it at this point. In the anger that she felt, yes, it was with him, but it was really with the police. No one believed her. No one took her seriously. They were supposed to be there to protect her. She didn't want to live with that anger. And in that moment, just thought, you know what? I just want to die. I just want to die. Suddenly, she heard a noise, and it was the 21-year-old son of the neighbors next door. He had appeared at the door. He had heard the sound of the axe destroying the bicycle and wondered what was going on and went to the door. That's when he opened the door and saw what was happening. Delia, so she looks and she sees John still standing to the side of her with the axe over his head, about to swing. Suddenly, the boy has a baseball bat and strikes John in the back before he was able to strike Delia with that axe again. So at this point, the boy's parents come to the door too. John instantly just takes off and runs away. And he takes the axe that he's carrying with him as he runs. So the neighbor calls for an ambulance, and Delia, she is covered in blood. She has 2 broken arms. She was a nurse. So she knew the severity of her attack. She could see the muscles and the tendons coming out of one of her arms, as well as the bone coming out of one of her arms. She felt so alone and in need of comfort, but she was covered in blood. She happened to see a little spot on her right shoulder on her clothing where there was no blood there. And it's like so heartbreaking. She asks the neighbor, the boy's dad, to touch her there. And she says, it gave me a small sense of comfort and physical warmth. In that moment, she thought she might never feel the sensations again because due to her injuries, she was most likely going to die. So even in that sense, she just thought, I just need some type of human contact just to feel a sense of comfort. It was just so, so heartbreaking to read that. So think of the scene that I just described, that Delia just describes in that book. So the police are called and they arrive. They are bothered that they're there. Yeah, you heard that right. They are bothered. They're saying, what's this about? Why are we here? What's going on? And Delia, who has blood everywhere and blood in her mouth as well, she can't speak clearly because of her injuries. And the neighbors are annoyed. So the wife, the 21-year-old's mom, says to the neighbors, police are aware she's been having issues with her ex-boyfriend, John Sweeney. He's the one that did this and he ran off. He has an axe. And she kind of pointed, that's the way he went. So the police took off and went to try to find him. So one of the police women who then come to the scene is Sarah Hill. So she was assigned to this case for Delia, and she was we hear about her a little bit earlier on, and Delia just does not like her. And she was supposed to be in charge of kind of protecting her. And she made the comment to Delia about that lost fingertip. She made just a insensitive comment about it. And she wouldn't go past where the blood was for Delia, and she just kind of stopped there. It's like, here's Delia, she just wouldn't help her. The neighbor then later informed Delia that Sarah Hill was reprimanded for the way that she had responded at the scene. It's like, you're the one here that was supposed to help, and not only did you not, but then you come and you like don't even want to get anywhere near her. And she's like, oh, look, you lost a finger. It was disgusting. It was disgusting to hear the way that Officer Hill responded. So paramedics now arrive. As they're removing Delia from the scene to get into the ambulance for the ride, Delia is in a lot of pain, keep in mind. And one by one, they start to remove her clothing and jewelry off of her. And the thing is, Delia, as I mentioned at the very beginning, she doesn't own many things. She likes to travel. So everything that she owns has been from like something that means something from where she traveled. And here they are cutting off these articles of clothing, cutting off this jewelry. And she felt that they were just stripping and taking away her. She says, quote, I feel like I'm being stripped of everything I have been as a person and will never see myself again, end quote. The pain was so much for Delia that once she's at the hospital and surrounded by staff, she just kind of remembers nothing at that point. But she, as she says many times throughout this, she just wanted to die. But fate had it different. She woke up. So she did survive the attack. And at this point in the book, she details very specifically, like way more in detail than I just gave y'all, all of the injuries she sustained, all of the medical things needed to do to correct and try to heal those injuries. And she still has, I mean, a lot of these things did not heal in a way where it was as though the attack never happened. You know, from a physical perspective, she still has a lot of outstanding things because of this. But again, she describes in detail what the hospital did to help her at that time. She found out while she was in surgery that her heart had failed and they had to give her drugs as a cardiac stimulant to get her heart pumping again. It was Christmas Day and she was now in the hospital surviving the attack. The policewoman, Officer Sarah Hill, decides to visit her at the hospital. So Delia, being unable to speak, wrote with her finger a message for Sarah. And it says, fucking bastard. So Delia started crying. She's just overwhelmed. And then Sarah started crying too. And Delia says, there's going to be a lot of things that she's going to have to answer for. And a few other detectives come and introduce themselves to Delia. What they say is they were not able to find John. He escaped after the attack. And they say, do you have any idea where he would be? And she said, the only place I can think of is Liverpool or Germany. He goes to Germany a lot for work. It wasn't until much later that she found out he actually went to his family, his ex-wife and kids. Yes, folks, turns out he had an ex-wife and kids that Delia did not know about. So he had left the ex-wife's home before that he became kind of listed on the news as being wanted for the attempted murder. So he went to stay with his ex-wife and kids, stayed there as long as he could. And then when he knew the news was going to break that he was wanted, he then left there and was on the run. So it was now Boxing Day, and one of the officers told Delia that they got information that John had cleared and got through customs at the border and escaped by boat, and he was somewhere now in continental Europe. And Delia describes every single day now was basically hell. It brought new procedures that prompted panic attacks. Delia describes each day the medical things that she had to get done by the doctors. And they were telling her, the doctors and the nursing staff, all the things that they had to do to save her life. After several days in ICU, Delia was transferred to the orthopedic ward on December 28th. So there's a lot medical that's happening. And it's, here's Delia saying, I don't want to live with this anger. I don't want to live with what happened for me. I just want to die. And then she doesn't die. She lives. And the anger that she has for that, and then all the complications that she has emotionally, physically, she can't even speak because her mouth is so damaged. All of these things. And then on top of that, nursing staff, doctors are saying, here's what you're going through. Here's all the things we had to do to save you, which I don't think I'm like, did they not realize like the mental state she was like, you're adding to her burden and her stress. You're not alleviating it. It was just a vicious cycle of what Delia was going through. It was just absolutely heartbreaking. So since John was still on the loose, there was a police guard guarding the hospital 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Delia was thinking, wow, the police officers are here now to protect me. Where were they when I said this is going to happen? He is going to kill me. So she had a lot of anger. This whole thing in her mind could have been prevented, but they didn't take it seriously. But now she was a top priority. So the police said they wanted to transfer to another hospital in the outskirts of London for her safety. Delia was so worn down. She's like, fine. But she later realized that the only reason that was suggested to her was for, quote, legal reasons, end quote. Had she known that at the time, she's like, I would have just refused the transfer. Police also wanted her to change her name because her name now was in the papers. So everybody was aware of what happened to her. And in her mind, she's thinking, wait a minute, I just went through all of this and now I'm being stripped of my name, of who I am again. So she did what they said. So she decided on the name Elizabeth Drake. Going forward, I'm not going to call her Elizabeth Drake. She is Delia. So that's what I'm going to refer her to as. But just keep that in mind that at this point, her name is now Elizabeth Drake. So it's now December 29th, 1994. It was less than 1 day since she was transferred to that new hospital, and a nurse informed her that she had tested positive for MRSA in the wounds to her skull and breast and in her nose. So now she had to be transferred to a single room infectious disease unit. So a policeman and policewoman officer, Sarah Hill, they now visit her at the new hospital. They said to Elizabeth, don't tell anybody anything. Don't tell them who you were, so on and so forth. Like, just keep everything under wraps. Delia's like, I'm messed up from the trauma that I've gone through, and now you don't even want me. You're taking away my option to even talk about it. So at the new hospital, Delia requested to see a counselor. So the on-call psychiatric registrar came to see her, and he said, can you tell me about the attack and what is your real name? She said, the police don't want me to talk about it. And he tried to persuade her to open up. She said she really wanted to, but she was going to obey the police request and decided not to tell him, which it's kind of heartbreaking because she wants to talk about it and hears someone saying, yes, tell me. But then she is torn between my name's out there. Like, it was just without her just saying it in the book, it's like this constant, like, vicious circle in her mind of the things of like what's right versus her own feelings and needs. It's horrible. Kind of the back and forth in her mind that she's going through. Hi, Tony. Good to see you. So during this time, Delia was going to find out that John was writing to the police about her. He was calling her an evil witch. He sent several postcards to the police. Every single one of them was a swear that I'm not really, really bad that I'm not going to say on air. But needless to say, that's what John was doing. So at this point, again, Sarah, who was supposed to be there to protect her, and all the other police officers never wanted to listen to Delia when she said, here's what he's done before, here's what he's going to do to me. But now the officers want to get as much information from Delia as she can give about his prior attacks. So Delia was now going to be giving that information, and she was upset. She put in writing that it still bothers her because on many levels, again, the police failed her. Now she lost a finger in this. So she has all these, her arms are just broken, destroyed. I mean, her body has been put through it. And one of the things that the doctor says to her is about an amputation. And she says, to this day, seeing the word or writing it still bothers her. It's a symbol of something she never wanted to be. And it's also a symbol of something that could have been prevented had the police listened to her, right? So the social worker decides, you know what? It seems that Delia is at risk of self-harm and has suicidal radiation. So there's that on top of it. On January 1995, one day, a nurse enters her room. So keep in mind, she's still in the hospital to remove the sutures from her finger. She's screaming and crying that it hurt so much, and it took the nurse an hour to remove it. When the doctor enters the room, Delia says, I hate what has happened to my finger. And the doctor says to her, you won't miss it. You don't really need it anyway. You can still do things. Like, what? What? So now we're in the month of February, and Delia was going to be discharged. The police wanted to place her in a refuge further away where John could not find her, but she insisted on staying in Camden at the center of town. On the way to the refuge, however, it was basically like, let's stop at the crime scene, which what were the police thinking? What were the police thinking? This was not her idea. This was not Delia's idea. This was the police. So when Delia arrived to her flat with police and she entered, she became very angry. She almost died there, right? But inside the flat, the police had completely ransacked it. She describes how she felt completely disrespected all over again. They didn't respect her. They didn't respect her belongings. And she is going through each item in her flat. Like, look at what they did to my blankets. Look at what they did to my teacups. Look at what they did to this, which it's just, again, to her, those were everything. They meant everything to her. She didn't own many belongings. And for them to be just so careless with her stuff, again, she just, another layer of disrespect that she was feeling. So when Delia arrives at the door of the refuge, she was greeted by Joan, who worked there. Joan's office door actually opened into Delia's flat. So she was there on weekdays. So that was actually a positive thing, because then Delia always had somebody there if she had wanted. Delia was still recovering from all of her injuries. Even though she was out of the hospital, she wasn't in the clear, so to speak, and she needed a lot of physical assistance. And she had people there, including Joan, that were able to assist her, even with things like slicing her, her breakfast bread for her, things like that, assist her with showering, so on and so forth. So Delia attempted to resume her daily dance exercises that she had always done and she was accustomed to. She now began to struggle, though, because her body had gone through such a traumatic experience and was not fully healed and would never be fully healed. So she did not have a good range of motion after that. And she would do it again and again and again to try to regain that full range of motion and movement. And again, as a fellow dancer, I read that just really, I'm like, I get that. I know what she's talking about with I know exactly what she's talking about with being able to do that. But then I don't know what she's talking about in regards to now that it's taken away from her. all like something that became an everyday thing was now gone and out of her control. Needless to say, that made her very upset, and she would cry all of the time. Let's see. Tony Stewart. I will have to watch the rerun. Okay, yeah. It's a tough read, so you have been warned. Hello, Sam Smith. It's got something to do with someone named Delia. As I tuned in late, that's all I know. Sam, you are caught up. Yes. You are very observant, if nothing else. So there was a victim support worker, Rebecca, who had gone to visit Delia. She would come and go once a week and would help Delia kind of get back to those normal daily things, like help with, any bills, drive her to the grocery store, so on and so forth. She got a lot of support and needs at this rehab home that she was staying at, refuge. So back to John. Delia would go on to learn that what happened to her was not the end of it. Not only was she a victim, there was a long line of other victims that he had dated and had assaulted and had hurt. With that knowledge, the court knew that, and the court would still let him out. They knew all of this. So Delia, again, she's trying to heal, and she's learning, I was not the only one. There were others. And the court knew this, and they let him out, and now look where I am. So she learned more about attacks against specific exes. They go back to the early 1980s, John's attacks against his partners, his then wife Anne, and then his girlfriend Melissa. We've heard about Melissa before. We will learn about her later in the book. So imagine what Delia's thinking, like, wait a minute. I went to the police and said, I'm in danger. Here's what's happening. He tries to, he abducts her, whatnot. The police then arrest him. They know all of these other things that he's done, and then they still gave him bail. And then look what happened. He went and tried to kill her. Can't even imagine the frustration. So about 6 weeks after the attack, Delia was talking to a friend, and the friend said, your parents need to know about this. So Delia agrees, and the friend tells her parents and brothers what happened. Her parents called right away to speak to her at the refuge, and yeah, she kind of looks back to that conversation she had with her brother and John when they'd gone to visit, and the brother just like flat out asked John, like, are you a serial killer? Because something wasn't right. And Delia looks back to that conversation. So now it's May 1995, 4.5 months after the attack. Delia began 20 cognitive behavioral treatment sessions with a clinical psychologist. 20. The sessions did not help her at all. The psychologist reports state, quote, I believe the assault has given rise to significant psychological problems. This event has had a significant impact upon this Balmer. Considering that she has had a comprehensive course of psychological treatment to the effect, a complete recovery is unlikely, end quote. That is horrific. Horrific. A complete recovery is unlikely. What? Like, it's so frustrating to read this, because it just seems like every step in the road, Delia is just being brushed aside, put down, act like we can't help you. We can't help you. So now she's going to the sessions to get help. Well, the assault gave a lot of psychological problems. Complete recoveries unlikely. Again, we can't help you. That's where it's coming to again, right? So at this point, again, John is still out. And where is he? It's like one of those things where Delia kind of talks about she always has to look over her shoulder. Where could he be? But then also kind of having to move forward in life, but she still holds a lot of anger and a grudge, which is understandable. So what Delia did to kind of start to move forward was she had 2 counselors along the way that actually were a great deal of help to her. She was able to complete an aromatherapy course. She went on to study for a degree in health studies and complementary therapies. She also volunteered as a massage therapist in the AIDS ward from January 1996 until December 1999, which is absolutely amazing of her. So then at this point, Delia meets a guy named Steve. They met at a local pub and they kind of hit it off. He was about 5 years older than Delia. They started out as friends for about a year, and then they started having dinner together at Steve's. And again, they were just friends, and she told him about John. With Steve, the friendship she had with him, she felt secure. And this was something that she hadn't felt for a very, very long time. In fact, she describes it as feeling security for the first time. He gave her comfort and knowledge that someone was there for her. So in May 2001, at this point, they are now dating. They are boyfriend and girlfriend. And Steve calls Delia to say, you're at work, but the police were here and they want to speak to you. Delia was outraged and refused and said, no, I will not speak to the police, because they know what it's about. They know it's about John. Steve ignored her, though. He thought he would be supportive by connecting the police with her, even though she outright told him, no, this is not helping things. Delia's anger that she had with the police, it never went away. So the police talk to Delia. What they tell her is, we found a woman, Paula Field, her body parts in a canal. This was a victim that had been identified through family DNA. Her body had been a Jane Doe, so to speak, for a really long time. They were able to trace that family DNA back to John, and he was actually now in jail being held for her murder. So what Delia says in response, she gave a stale laugh to this. She told the police, you were the ones that let him out. Look at what he did to me. Now look at what he did to Paula. But he actually was able to commit the murder against Paula. Let's see. Hey, Dani, I have so much admiration and respect for Delia. Much love. Oh, well said, Karen. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're getting there. We're getting there. And we're going to hear a lot more about the strength and what Delia does. So, but yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Delia's an incredible, incredible woman. And that is just putting it mildly. She's amazing. So what the police had found, because again, now John was finally in jail, they found he changed his name. And they were able to catch him. And here's where, so once they caught him, it's well, where has he been? This was 6 years. 6 years since he attacked Delia, where she was almost murdered. So what they learned was, in that 6 years' time, he used a fake passport and hitched around Europe, and he always changed his appearance to resemble somebody else. In 2000, he moved to North London and went by the name Joe Carroll. Delia also learned from police how John and Paula's friendship started, and then what led to them kind of getting to the point in their friendship where then John ended up killing her. Because again, John, we've learned very much about his, to say mood swings is just not even giving it justice, but how he can go from 0 to 60 with his anger and become very violent. And Delia goes a lot more into detail about that with Paula. In regard to the murder of Paula, John, when he was confronted with it, initially denied responsibility. It was obvious that he had killed her. But the thing was, there was insufficient evidence. So get this, the murder charges had to be dropped. So what the police did instead was they brought new charges against John for the attempted murder of Delia. So this case was now going to go to court. John pled not guilty to the attempted murder. And what Delia says is he did this knowing I would have to go to court to testify. And that was another way to punish her. The police would come to visit Delia and Steve multiple times a week. Delia was always very angry and adamant that she wanted nothing to do with this whatsoever. She felt that the police didn't care about her back then. She was almost murdered. Why should you care for me now? They would try to say, well, you'll feel better after you tell your side of the story. And she said, I'd been telling my story all along to the police. They're the ones that failed to listen. I already told my story. I will say at this part of the book, we're kind of winding it towards the end, the kind of rage and just outright anger that Delia feels towards John, but to law enforcement. It's evident in like every single sentence as you're reading this part of the book. Delia does not hold back. She does not hold back how angry she is. And it's so upsetting and frustrating to read because she's absolutely right. This whole thing could have been prevented. And look where we are. So that's my cat, by the way, just making those noises in case that's picking up. So what was upsetting to Delia as well was Steve. He was supposed to be her partner and support her, but he felt like, I know, like this will help Delia. This will help her, get her to court, testify, so on and so forth. So he was dismissing what she was flat out saying, this is not helping. And he thought he knew better. So that was another source of, another layer of what Delia had to go through, but also a stress that was now being put on their relationship. So what would happen was Steve and Delia would start to drink more, and Delia would warn him that nothing good can come from this. What's going on, for each of us, for our relationship, nothing good is going to come of this. And then she says, but just like the police, Steve did not listen. So Delia and Steve were now fighting more frequently, all because of the police. So Delia was going to go back to court, which was against what she wanted to do. They were going to basically make her go. I don't know what the kind of legal term in the UK would be. I know here in the States, you would get that, like the police could just subpoena you and you would have to go, or you would be arrested if you didn't. I don't know the kind of legal aspect it is over in the UK though. So if somebody does know, please let me know in the comments. So Delia, now being forced to go to court, talks in great detail. I won't get into all of it here. Goes into great detail about the day she had to be at court and give her testimony. This was the first time she saw John since the attack over 6 years ago. She was defiant. She did not want to sit. She stood the whole time that she would have to talk on the stand. And she also didn't hold anything back, even basically saying to the court, she just held nothing back, even her anger towards the police, the court, etc. Delia observed that John looked exactly the same as he did when she last saw him over 6 years ago. What she said was, meanwhile, I was the one who was messed up, and I knew I looked messed up, and he would enjoy seeing me like that. So when it came time for Delia to swear on the Bible in court, she said she didn't believe in God. So they insisted that she swear to some other words. This was one of those, this paragraph was for me, one of the just strongest moments of Delia where I'm like, yes, girl, yes. I got you. I hear you. I agree. I support. It was just so powerful. So what she says was the other words that they said, just swear to something. So what she does is she says, for example, I swear this is my broken arm. And then she kind of lifts her shirt to show them all the damage that was happening on her arms. I swear these are my 2 torn tendons. Again, lifts her clothing to show. I swear that this is the stab wound to my breast and into my lung. Again, twisting, pulling up her shirt to show all of these marks that she has on her. It was just, you could envision it. It was so powerful. Needless to say, the judge didn't appreciate that. The state didn't appreciate that. The defense of John did not appreciate that. So the judge postponed that trial until 2 p.m. that day, and a stay of execution had been achieved because of that. And those who were on the side of prosecuting against John had said to Delia, you made a fool of yourself. No one had ever done that before. And she's like, I was against coming. What did you expect was going to happen? I mean, she was just like giving it right back. When she got back to court, so Steve could be in the courtroom with her, but he was, and she didn't know this till later, he was kind of told, don't look at Delia, don't anything, like don't acknowledge her. But Delia says, I pointed out to him who John was. And then John looked at Delia, gave a kind of sarcastic smile and a patronizing tone, said, hello, how are you? Delia's like, I just ignored him. She was angry at John, but she's like, I was far angrier at the court, at the police, because they were the ones that allowed this attack to happen in the first place. The police should have been the ones to protect me, but they failed. So on the stand, again, when now Delia was, I use the word cross-examined by John's attorney. It doesn't have that term in the book. Again, in the UK, I don't know if it's called a different term, but I'm just using the term cross-examined. John's attorney really went out of his way to ask Delia just the most embarrassing questions and things that he knew would get her riled up. And it was just like, you're like traumatizing her again and trying to make her look like the issue. So for example, he would question, oh, you drink. Oh, you're a drug user, right? And again, all bullshit things that John made up. Oh, you're mentally unstable. Oh, you have sexually transmitted diseases and you're the one that gave it to my client. You say that you're the one that wanted him to move into your flat. You took the trip to Mexico together and, you had sex with him all the time. And she had to like break down everything, say, we did not have sex. He had sex. I went on vacation to Mexico. He went on his own accord and made my trip hell, like so on and so forth. And with each sentence that she's trying to argue back that the defense is putting on her, you hear what she says in the book. Like you hear it from the pages. It's just written so well. But also in between each statement, she says, like, there'll be like another paragraph underneath in italics, like of what went through her mind. Like in her mind, she's thinking this, but then this is how she responds. And it's like that for everything. It's so powerful and so like such a great part of the book to read about like how she's processing this. Like she's like, what, why would you even ask that? Like in her head, but then she responds a certain way. Delia, again, got very angry on the stand. She screamed, she cried, she yelled, so on and so forth. She, after she testified on the stand, she started having vivid dreams and nightmares in her sleep, and her mind kept replaying the scene in court, which would force her to relive it again and again. She was so traumatized, she was then required to take 6 weeks off of work. Everything in life began to bother her at this point. People's actions, words, noise, everyone, no matter how trivial, even people's presence simply bothered her at this point. Hi, James Watson. Good to see you. Yes, it's still. I'll be ending soon, hon. It's all right. You can go back to hanging out with Beckham. All good. So it wasn't until several weeks later that it occurred to Delia that like after having all of these nightmares, that quote, if I had any honor left in me before, it was taken away from me in court. I have no honor now, end quote. She then started sinking into a very deep depression that lasted for months, and it never, even still, never truly went away. So now we're at November 6, 2001, and John Sweeney was found guilty of the attempted murder of Delia. So Delia learns this, in that when the jury convicted him, he started screaming at them, and he actually had to be forcibly removed. And what Delia also learned after the fact, again, there's so much that she learns after, which I can't even imagine how. It's like she's working through the trauma of everything she's been through, and then it's like, oh, by the way, this, oh, by the way, that, and then it just piles on. But one of the things she made was that what she learned was John made some more art sketches of her. They were very graphic, very violent, and one of them said, "May you die in pain, inspired by, dedicated especially to Delia," which is just, oh, he's such a creep. So Delia and her relationship with Steve, as you can imagine, it just wasn't in a good place at this point. Things could never be the same. He didn't listen to her, and in her mind, she's like, he helped the court, he helped law enforcement, he helped the police. So when Steve's daughter had come out to visit, things got triggered again, because her career was a police officer, and Delia didn't want to meet her, but it was inevitable, it was going to happen, but it just didn't go well. And 2 days after the daughter left to go home, there was a lot of anger from Delia, hurt and bitterness and pain, and it all came out while Steve's daughter was there. On February 13th, 2002, John Sweeney was sentenced. He had been convicted of additional charges of firearms offenses for a stash of guns that the police had found when they raided his home. He was given 4 life sentences to run concurrently. What Delia then goes on to describe, again, the UK justice system and legal system is very different than here in the States. And even still here within the States, every state is different from each other. So where she's from in the UK, a life sentence does not really mean life. So based on the sentences that he got, the 4 life sentences to run concurrently, he would be eligible for release in April 2011. Keep in mind, let me just repeat those dates. February 13th, 2002 sentenced, eligible for release April 2011. That's not very long. So post-trial, Delia wrote to a lot of reporters that she was extremely frustrated. So like reporters were commenting and writing on this case, but getting like the facts and what happened to her wrong. So she was pissed. Not only are they talking and writing about her, but they're getting it wrong. So she would write a lot about that. So her boyfriend, so Steve's health was starting to deteriorate really rapidly. They were, again, not in a great place still, seeing less and less of each other. He broke a rib, developed pneumonia. He had an abscess on his lung, and then ultimately he was diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus. By the time the cancer diagnosis came, they actually hadn't seen each other in a long time. Although they both needed comfort and both wanted someone, they both just gave each other stress. And one night, Steve actually opened up to Delia and said, quote, "I am on a downward spiral. Ever since that court case, my health has been deteriorated. Look at what it has done to me," end quote. And he was crying while he finally spoke the truth. By that October, doctors had operated on Steve. However, the cancer had spread. Delia and Steve got in a couple of angry arguments. It's like he blamed her for everything, and also would just yell at her for everything. Like a lot of anger he had was just being kind of directed at her. And the last time she saw Steve was in the hospital after the operation, and he was angry with her about that. So she ran out of the hospital, and she's like, I just didn't visit him again. When she would bike past his home following a workday, she could see the light shining in his flat. And she could, at one point, saw Steve's dim figure in the balcony before he went inside. At that point, for the next 5 to 6 weeks, every time she would ride her bike by at night, there was no light on in his flat. And she was kind of thinking, well, what happened? Is he in the hospital? What's going on? On December 7th, 2004, she was on her way home from work, and Steve's son saw her and approached her. And so she said, how is Steve doing? He had said that his dad died the previous night around 1 a.m. in a hospice home. Delia wanted to escape. She said she wanted someone to be with, but there was no one now. There was no Steve anymore. And she said to Steve's son, they did this. And he replied, no one's to blame, Delia. So now it is February 2008. Hey, Capone. So Delia had been on a trip to Panama, Costa Rica. Travel, again, as we talked about at the very beginning of the book, it was always like the one brightness in her life. When she returned from travel, her neighbor said, hey, the police came by. They want to speak to you. So Delia's like, I have no interest in this. The police came by the next day, and Delia knew why they were there. John Sweeney is due for release in April 2011 at the earliest, the policewoman said. Delia cut her off and just didn't let her get any further. This is an insult to me after all the suffering I've been through, and then after what they did to me in court. Delia was not interested and wanted to be left alone, but they wouldn't leave her alone. The reason being, there was recent new developments in regards to Melissa's body. They thought it had been missing this whole time, had never been found. Turns out in 2008, the Dutch police used new forensic techniques. They had an unidentified body which had been buried in one of their cemeteries, and it was exhumed for cold case review. The head, hands, and feet were missing, and there were no dental records at the time it was discovered back in May 1990. DNA testing, however, as we know, had changed, so much so since then. So a match was done with blood DNA samples held on file from family members. And on January 29, 2008, police confirmed that the body that they found was in fact Melissa Halstead, John Sweeney's former girlfriend. So the police were adamant they were going to bring this to trial, and they want Delia to testify. She was under the impression that they said, okay, come in for an interview, we'll record it this time. So she's thinking, okay, if I come in and and record it, I won't have to go to court. But of course, the police being police wouldn't. It was like, yeah, you're going to do that, but you're also going to have to go to court too. So it was just horrible. So police came to do the interview with her, and the police came and knocked on her door, and she wouldn't let them in. She's just like, no. The next door neighbor eventually gained Delia's permission to enter and persuaded her to go to the police station to meet with police. And she's like, I'll accompany you. Delia, while she was there, refused to answer the detective's questions regarding Melissa. She's thinking the police aren't listening to me. She wasn't going to do them any favors, so she didn't answer the questions while they filmed her. She just shouted enraged. Again, they were going to force her to go to court. They made that very, very clear. So at one point when the police officers went to her home, it was 2 weeks before the court date where she would have had to go and the trial was supposed to start. And what she said to police was, don't make me do this. Look what I've started doing again. She then bashed herself on the head to demonstrate how badly the demands that they were putting on her were affecting her. Finally, the police took note of this and sent her to a forensic psychiatrist. And after seeing her, that psychiatrist was like, her going to court again will be detrimental to her mental health and physical well-being. So she was excused from court. And she says in the book, quote, this is the best the police have ever done for me, end quote. So which cat is making that noise? That's Loki. So that is the end of the chapters. At the very last thing is a very brief epilogue that just says in March 2011, John Sweeney was on trial for killing Melissa Helsteed and then Paula Fields. He said both murders had been set up. And Delia's statement was read to the jury. Again, she did not have to be there. Throughout the trial, John would interrupt the court. He would yell insults. And Delia was following this in the news. So she was not there, but she was following it in the news. The most critical piece of evidence in the case was John's artwork. And remember, right? Delia, when she read that, thought, wait a minute, I showed and I tried to say to police back before he tried to kill me, look at this. Like, this is bad. He says this, he said he did this. Look at this. They wanted nothing to do with it. And now this was the most critical piece of evidence in that case. So she was angry. In total, the police recovered 201 drawings from John, and those were all used against him in his trial. On April 4, 2011, the jury found John guilty of the murders of Melissa and Paula. The judge sent John to a whole life order. So this now meant that John would die behind bars and he would never get out of prison. So that is the end of my book review. Again, a lot of notes on this one. There was a lot to talk about. So if anybody's not familiar with John Sweeney, this is about him from Delia Balmer's perspective. This book was a great read. I definitely recommend it to everybody to read. And I'm glad this was voted for the book club choice for this month. So if anybody has read it, please leave your comments in the drop down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this book. Or if you're like, you know what, this one's way too violent for me, I won't be reading it. This is definitely one of the more graphically violent true crime books I've read in quite a bit. So I'm saying that up front as a disclaimer. So, thanks, you guys. Oh, geez. Capone. So with that being said, next month, so July's book club choices. So what I was thinking is, because there's like so many different platforms where people will I do the Facebook poll, I get responses by email, by Instagram DMs, so on and so forth. So what I'm thinking is I will still kind of post in different platforms, but I will also post like a poll on here on YouTube. So I'll do a post and do a poll in that, and people can vote in there as well. I just kind of want to give as many options to reach as many people as I can. So we'll do that as well. I'll post something with next month's book selections for people to vote upon in the next couple of days, and we'll kind of go from there for July. And again, if anybody wants to read the book and join me on camera to discuss it, feel free. That the more the merrier. Or if you just kind of want to read it and hang back in the chat, feel free to do that as well. It can be as much or as little as you want to partake in it. A few other things. True Crime and Chill will be live tomorrow night. Tune into that. And then Monday, I will have a friend of the show, Travis Myers, back on Dani After Dark. So I'm really looking forward to that. We will both be at the True Crime Podcast Festival it's like 3 weeks away here in Massachusetts. So we're looking forward to that. And yeah, so he's going to come back and we're going to hang out and chat more about his stories from his time working in the field as a New York City detective. And then, yeah, he has a lot of stories and he will take questions as well. So yeah, it's going to be a good time. So tune into that. All right, everybody. I think that is it for now. Over 2 hours. I very much enjoyed this book and took a lot of notes. So yeah, I'm not surprised that the episode's 2 hours, but I hope you all enjoyed this review. And again, I definitely recommend this book to anybody who is looking for a read on this. I love very victim-centered books because it needs to be about the victims first and foremost. So again, this is Living with the Serial Killer, Delia Balmer, my story. All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will see you tomorrow night with Mr. Beckham for the True Crime and Chill. Remember, until next time, everyone, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us. Bye.